So I have the enormous pleasure today of introducing Mr. Ian Gotts onto our vlog from Elements.Cloud. How are you, Ian?
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely my pleasure. So why don't we start with a description of what Elements.Cloud does?
Yeah, thank you. So we're an ISV, we're a software product. The challenge we're solving is that most people start building before they've really understood what they should be building. And they spend time building it, then the users don't use it, user adoption goes down. So we're all about make sure you build the right thing. So it's all of that, the activity, all the documentation about planning. So capturing requirements, mapping business processes, writing architecture diagrams, understanding what's in the Salesforce org, understanding the impact of any change, and then writing a user story, and then passing that all off to. We stop there, and that gets passed off to the DevOps team where they'll start to build it. But it's all the documentation associated with the analysis phase, the planning phase, and I think the really exciting part about that is lots of that aspects of that can be supercharged with AI. So Elements.GPT for us is the AI that's infused across every aspect of that.
It's really interesting because I joined Salesforce way back in. Blimey, 2008. That's a long time. Hence the no hair now. A very long time ago. And back then, every Salesforce implementation was fairly straightforward. I think we just about got custom objects. So it was like you got accounts and contacts, and then you might want to lop on another custom object onto the side of that just to sort of enable some other non-sales process. But fast forward like to 2023, and the sheer number of options, the sheer level of complexity within that Salesforce platform means that it's remarkably easy to make a big mess of things, isn't it, Ian?
Oh, yeah, you can get yourself into trouble really quickly. But also, the power of that means you can configure it to do what you want. I mean, we were an early Salesforce customer. I mean, I'm going to play trumps here. 2001, we were a Salesforce customer. But we had 300 custom objects because we said we built out everything because there was no app exchange. And we built the product now that we wanted back then in 2001 to manage it. So I think what we're hearing from customers is three things. All complexity. So that slows the agility down. The reason we bought Salesforce is because it can be agile, it can change. But if there's so much complexity, it makes it really hard to change without breaking things. The second is the technical debt. Not necessarily because you built the wrong thing, but because the platform's moved on and therefore there are changes you need to make. But I think the kicker is the fact there's no documentation. No one's written down why we did all these things, so therefore we can't change them. So I mean, that, again, but Elements is part of that, which is we're pulling out and starting to almost help self-document that org for you. But those I think are making it really hard to change Salesforce at pace, and we need to roll that. We need to solve that problem because the whole power of Salesforce is you can be agile, you can make changes relatively easily.
Absolutely,
in a strategic application, it's a core application for many customers now.
Yeah, I also think one of the great things about the Salesforce platform is you can be like a one-person company, and you have access to. We used to sell this as a sort of this is the big sort of like sales message is democratizing cloud, democratizing access to enterprise tech. And for us at the time, it was like a sales pitch, right? Because you're not the end user, and you're not even an implementation consultant. You're just like selling this stuff. And it was when I left Salesforce, I really sort of understood like the importance of those statements, which is that as a small company, you can literally just get Salesforce.com. You have access to all the same capabilities like a multinational would have. All the same sort of org limits and stuff like that, so you can really build whatever you want to build, and it's absolutely phenomenal. But I think that puts you on a journey, doesn't it? And some of the challenges that I've found, even at Rocket Fund, we use Salesforce internally, obviously, and it's very easy to sort of build functionality at the start very, very quickly, and then there are dependencies, and if you build this, and you have to build that, and if you build it this way, then you've got to make sure you do that way, and it's not always clear what those dependencies are. And I think I had a look at your collateral, and it seems that those are sorts of problems that you can really make life easier for admins and developers.
This is Muj, CEO of RocketPhone.ai. And as CEO, This means Muj is often away from his desk. Muj uses his mobile for all kinds of business calls, but it's a pain to remember the outcomes and keep his CRM updated. So that's why we built RocketCell. With our eSIM, all you need to worry about is having great conversations. No need for an app, just make and receive calls like normal. RocketCell records, transcribes, and analyzes each conversation, automatically logging it in Salesforce with a recording, transcript, call summary, coaching tips, and much more. Join the waitlist today and experience the world's first business mobile network for Salesforce.
And developers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole ability, I mean, also consultants, the ability to actually walk into a Salesforce org, connect Elements.Cloud to it, and relatively quickly it gives you a readout of, okay, if you touch that, that gets changed, which is changes that and changes that and changes that. And I think, yes, it's really powerful what you can do, but I think if you put AI on top of that, the ability to have AI get access to that information. So, I mean, I think a lot of people have talked about GPT and they use it like sort of Google on steroids. I'll ask it some questions and it comes back with better answers. And that's good, but that's not where GPT goes. GPT is really, really good if you give it all the puzzle pieces, solving puzzles, using its ability to reason. So let me give you an example. We obviously got for an org, we've got all the metadata and we have all the dependencies. So we gave it, inside Elements GPT, we gave it all the metadata, all the dependencies, and then we gave it an extra spreadsheet. We said, because we understand the complexity of every metadata item, we gave it a spreadsheet that said, if this metadata item, a complex one takes this long to change, simple this long to change. So we gave it all this information, and then we simply said, we want to change the stage field on opportunity, typically quite a complex field. How long will it take to make all the changes to everything which is dependent on it and downstream? And he went, 96 hours. Okay, show me you're working. And he went, well, we got this many flows of this complexity and you've got these many reports, and it went through and described it. What's really interesting about that is we didn't have to write all that logic. We gave it the data, because we've got that data, and it then reasoned and worked out the answers and came back with a pretty good answer. That saved us probably 6 months of development effort. Because building that algorithm to work its way down our massive dependency tree, apply the complexity, then add it all up, would have taken quite a lot of effort to build that, and then that would have been one specific bit of algorithm we'd have to build. Now we've got GPT. There are all sorts of questions you can ask like that, and its reasoning is really good. And you don't get hallucinations the way you do when you just ask general ChatGPT, because we're not asking for its view of the world. We're saying, only work off this data set and make sense of this data set for us. And because we've got data for an org, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, you're laying down the constraints, aren't you, by saying only work within these parameters. I'm not interested in anything outside of this, which is really interesting for me because when I first came across, not GPT-4 but GPT-3 was when I was first exposed to it. Obviously, our own company, RocketPhone.ai, we're all about sort of voice processing and stuff like that. So, understanding natural language processing was fairly fundamental to what we do. So we looked at GPTs and LLMs and all this sort of stuff, and it's. If you look at OpenAI in particular and ChatGPT, it's about the prompt, isn't it, rather than the large language model. It's about what you ask how you ask for it to do something for you. And I know you have a view on that because you wrote an entire article on it. So may I bother you to elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I think the power of GPT is in the questions you ask. And the analogy or the example I gave was, if you manage to meet your hero, whether it's sort of Mark Benioff or Taylor Swift or Ryan Reynolds, or in my world, a bass player like Guy Pratt, what would you ask them? You've got 5 minutes. What question would you ask them? And so getting the meeting's hard, but actually then making sure you make the most of that 5 minutes. And I think the same was with GPT. The prompt you ask has to be a lot more detailed. And I think people's people go, I asked this question, it didn't come back with some very good answers. Well, that's because you weren't specific enough in terms of the question. So think of the question as you're instructing an 18-year-old male intern, and I choose male deliberately because they are absolutely right, never in doubt, not necessarily right. So you obviously need to check the answers. But okay, super enthusiastic, really quick. But if you need to ask the question in enough detail, and some of the prompts that we're using inside Elements for our own internal use, not for GPT. Well, we're using them for Elements GPT, but also for using our own GPTs for our productivity enhancers. Some of those prompts are 400 or 500 words long.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're a prompt template. So it's a 400 or 500 words, and then it goes change that, change that, change that. So you replace some things before you then give it a prompt. So we're building a prompt library. So I'll give you an example. One of them is we have an internal website where we publish all the features and functions that are coming out so that the marketing team, the customer success team, the sales team have early access about what the feature is, why we're building it, what the benefits are. That website gets built automatically through GPT, but the prompt is about 300 or 400 words long, and then you insert, these are the features, these are the benefits. It then goes and builds all the HTML. And that's a prompt that's been refined over the last 6 months. So as we get better and better, we change that prompt template. So think of a prompt not as, I asked Google for something, but more it's a template, like an email template that you're refining and getting better and better and better at. So we've got to think about prompts in a different way. We've got to think about storing them, managing them, monitoring them, giving access rights. Think of them as like configuration. Think of them as code.
I'm going to sound really old now, but it sounds. I look it as well, but it doesn't matter anymore. I've got the salt and pepper thing going on. I mean, what you're saying, it takes me right back to the. I started my career at IBM in San Jose at the Silicon Valley Labs, and I was working on big data platforms, all driven by IBM DB2, which is a big database system, and we were talking about 5GLs, or fifth generation languages, right? And the whole purpose of a 5GL was that you give it some context and it delivers an application almost.
Yeah.
And it's taken like nearly 40 years from that point to when we first started talking about 5GLs to get into here, and now we have LLMs and kind of delivering on that dream almost. That's kind of how it feels.
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to my CTO, Adrian King, and about probably 2 or 3 years ago, he talked about the whole idea of carbon versus silicon. We're carbon life forms, and the problem is that we write stuff, and then silicon life forms, computers need to have it described in a certain way.
Yeah.
Up until probably less than in the last year, we had to talk in terms that silicon understood. Mm-hmm. So whether it was assembler or then first languages, 4GLs, 5GLs, we're still having to modify our discussion in a way that the computer understands. Large language models, for the first time ever, Silicon's now talking in terms that we understand. So we can now talk to it in carbon words, English, and it's now working out what to go and do. Now you keep on roll that forward, and there's quite a discussion now in Silicon Valley about 5 years from now coding will be irrelevant. Why would you code? Because if you can just say to I want an application to do this, this, and this, and it generates it, and you go, well, that's not quite right, have another go at it. It throws away 10,000 lines of code and starts again. So we're getting to a point where it's not just an evolution of 3GL, 4GL, 5GL, but we're actually making this major shift to it's now computers are now listening to us as the way we talk, rather than us having to talk to the way that computers understand. I mean, that's a fundamental shift.
It's absolutely bonkers when I think about it, because it's almost like if you look at that roadmap and you extrapolate out maybe a few more years, really we're just what you're saying to me is my brain is just my sort of biological mush in my cranium is kind of where we're headed towards, right? We're just going to end up recreating ourselves.
Oh yeah, but also it's about suddenly your ability to ask questions, your ability to describe what you need is now paramount.
It absolutely is.
I kind of want a system like this, and the developer goes, yeah, I know what you said, but I know what you really mean. And I think what's interesting is what Elements creates used to intermediary documents. You've got the user story, you've got the process map. You go, okay, I've got that, but we'll throw that away because we've now built the application. Well, first of all, don't throw it away because you're going to evolve that, which is fine. But the point is, we were intermediary documentation.
Yeah.
You roll the clock forward, and then suddenly there is no coding, or a lot of coding gets built for you. The content we're creating is now the end product. It's not intermediary documentation. That is the thing that's actually, and back to the prompt. The prompt is the end product.
Yep.
Because it's now, you finish at the prompt and the large language model takes over from there. So suddenly getting really prescriptive and going, let's get better at this. So our product management team, thinking about Elements GPT, they took 3 days to optimize a prompt. 3 days.
Right. Yeah.
But that prompt is going to get used tens of thousands of times because it takes a process map and it builds a user story. And it builds a really good user story because they've spent ages optimizing the prompt. Just swapping 2 words around in the prompt makes a real difference. Using capitals in the prompt makes a difference because it takes it more seriously. So getting good at optimizing those prompts is going to be a skill. It's not just, it's like a Google search. Actually, it's going to be a skill, and we'll need to refine these things and get better and better and better at them.
Yeah, it's almost like like declarative coding, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
In some respects, I think. Yeah, I'm very keen to see what develops there. Because I was looking at this. Gartner do these hype cycle graphs, and you have these phases. So the innovation trigger, inflated expectations, trough of disillusionment, enlightenment, and then plateau of productivity, which is kind of where it all lands eventually. And they see generative AI as we're at the very peak of the hype cycle right now. So it's probably a little bit pessimistic to be there as far as Gartner's concerned, because it's only down from here. I kind of disagree with that, because I think it's the application of generative AI that's going to make the difference. And what you've described just there in terms of prompt engineering and making sure that understanding how to get out of the LLM something that is useful and valuable is going to be the skill that needs to be developed over time. And I think if we can do that properly, then the relevance of these generative AI platforms will only increase in strength, I think, over time. But I wonder how much are they going to suck in? So for example, right, in our platform, we have various bits of AI that we do. So one of the things that we do is predictive scheduling, right? So if you're a sales rep and you want to call 1,000 people, rather than call them at random, it's going to look at all the historic call patterns. It doesn't say, right, Ian Gotts, call him on Thursday at 4 p.m. That's the best time to call him. Okay. Call Muj on Monday morning, best time to call him, right? Call Susan on Tuesday at 3 p.m. So it goes through your entire call list and it schedules them based on what it understands about your availability. And it's a machine learning algorithm, so over time it improves and it adjusts and gets better. And that's an example of narrow AI, right? And there's no LLMs involved. The data set is all the historic call information. And we take inputs from like how people respond to calls and how long they speak for and all that sort of stuff. Is there a risk that narrow AI like that is going to get sucked into something like an LLM? Or are LLMs or generative AI platforms not interested in that kind of AI because that infers a level of analysis that LLMs currently don't get involved in? Does that make sense? When I say analysis, it's like you can ask an LLM, you can ask ChatGPT, right, what's happened with bond yields over the next 3 years. And because it's read the Financial Times, these last 3 months, it has an idea of what's going to happen to bond yields, right? But it can't say why or how because it doesn't really understand the trajectory.
So I get that. So that bond yield example is an example of it. Tell me what you know about the world and tell me what you've read. And your first example about call patterns, you could use a combination of your predictive AI, but also the generative AI, about give it all this data and try and make sense of these patterns for me, and then come back. And it could go, okay, the generative AI could probably come back and go, I've scheduled these in this order because these are, let me explain why I've done it. Also, here are the sorts of things you might want to say to these people, because I've also looked at the sort of conversations you've had. So the combination of the two, which is using your predictive AI, which is when's the best time to call, but also looking at the call histories and go, I've looked at all of those, and when you call Mitch, this is what you should be talking about. And by the way, I've also had a look at his LinkedIn profile, and he's just posted about blah. Why don't you mention that? So I think the combination of those is where it gets more powerful. And I think we need to get the real use cases are at the moment for GPT are quite narrow. It's not tell me about Salesforce or help me. It's quite narrow. It's like this is a great call scheduler. This is this is really good at writing case studies in your style. This is a really good way of an example which I was blown away. First call this morning. Talk to me about a process, and Elements GPT will draw that process as a process map.
Right.
Draw it out. Boxes, lines, inputs, outputs, resources.
Yeah.
And that's a combination of it understands what the UPN standard is, it understands what our JSON format is, but it also has a combination of, when I said talk to me about the commissions process, it actually understands what commissions are, and it's got enough examples of what commissions could look like. So there's an example of combination of some standards, but also a little bit of knowledge about how the world works. And we're thinking about GPT or AI in a couple of different ways inside our application. We've got AI integrated, where it's doing a job for you. So that example of draw me a process diagram, write me a user story, take this call script and look at and pull out the business requirements. So that's AI integrated. So that's part of the core product. But we've also got the concept of co-pilots. So things that sit alongside you. So you may have drawn a process map, but a co-pilot might be, I'll coach you on why I think this process could be improved, either in the documentation standard, or I've looked at the process and gone, from history, I know that there are some steps that you probably shouldn't have thought of. So we're thinking about co-pilot, or another co-pilot could be, tell me about the org. The co-pilot will coach you. You can ask the question of my earlier example. Stage field, how long do you think it's going to take to change?
Right.
So that's a co-pilot because it's not infused in the product. It's not something you do, but it's actually about questioning. And I think the reason we've deliberately separated them into, is it something that's doing something for you, AI integrated, or is it a co-pilot sitting alongside you, coaching you, helping you, making you more productive? And I'm trying to think about them in those two different ways. And those buckets make it easier to separate them out.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's clearly a lot of innovation sort of in the DNA of Elements.Cloud, and excuse me, and you're clearly a very sort of like forward-thinking person as an individual. I happen to know that you took a wander one day, got lost, and wound up living in America. But before all of that, you were in the UK, and I think in your early career, you worked at British Rail, which is our national railway transportation network. And you have some thoughts on sort of risk-taking and innovation, don't you?
That takes me back. God, that was 1980s. So yeah, I was part of British Railways, the engineering bit. So we played with the trains rather than ran the trains. And I think it's really interesting. It was essentially a government-run agency, although obviously latterly it's been nationalised. And I think it was really interesting. People would not take a risk. And I think big organisations don't tend to be very risk takers. But I think the really weird thing is also, you watch someone and go, oh yeah, Pete got it wrong and he got promoted. Okay, well hang on. So you're saying you can take a risk and get it wrong, and there's no risk to you at all because the guy got promoted, but you're still not prepared to take a risk. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, you've got to be happy with risk. You've got to be happy with innovation. The example would be, okay, GPT. We started building stuff based on GPT-3. The latest release of OpenAI came out, and some of the stuff we built, fine. That's now been wiped out because it's already part of the platform. But you can't sit on your hands and wait and go, well, maybe the next release will be there. You've got to keep on moving forward. And you've got to accept that some of the decisions you've made based on the information in front of you, you walk forward 2 years, 6 months, or in AI terms, 3 months, and then those decisions were wrong. And you can't agonise over, God, I wish I'd done that. You just got to keep on moving forward. And I think innovation is a mindset. And I think the thing when I've both running Nimbus and now Elements, one of our policies is ask for forgiveness, not permission. Okay? Yeah, fine. Go for it. If you get it wrong, we'll learn from it. You won't be punished. You won't be blamed. No one will bring that back. Okay, 6 months ago, do you remember you did that? Because that kills off any innovation. People won't take a risk. They won't try things because they're always worried about the backlash. And the power of actually people taking a risk and moving forward and learning from it is way more powerful than the risk-averse cost of actually getting something wrong.
Right, yeah.
And
I completely agree with you. And I would agree with you because I'm also founder of a startup. It's like, I think there's something like intrinsically wrong with us or not quite right about us, but it's all good. We enjoy it.
but even if you're, I mean, it doesn't matter what size the company is, whether you're, I mean, I ended up being the CIO of the DSS, the biggest government agency. And again, they were very risk averse.
Yeah.
But trying to infuse that can't of innovation. And sometimes it was about spinning a separate team off and letting that team be innovative. And then everybody else went, well, hang on, why can't I be in that team? Because that's the innovative team. And over time, it starts to percolate across the organisation.
It does.
I had, 500 people in the team. But we had some very innovative groups there. And people saw the success of those innovative groups and they started to mirror that behaviour. And we got more and more of the people being innovative. And again, I had to then defend them against the classic government, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I thought my role a lot was actually breaking down some of those barriers and defending them so they had the space to innovate, to make changes, to do things in different ways.
Yeah. And that was one of the beauties of actually being a Salesforce.com employee, was that Mark Benioff from the very top downwards was sort of very... that adage of just hire really good people and let them get on with it, and it was very much like that, and I think a lot of the great things that came out of Salesforce was because of that sort of attitude towards risk and just give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen, So it was just a great culture, to be in. Speaking of Salesforce, it's worth touching on. Going back to Elements.Cloud and the investment that companies make in Salesforce licenses. I mean, some people say that Salesforce licenses are expensive. I don't think they're expensive. I think if you think that you haven't understood quite the extent of the platform and the power of the platform, what you can do with the platform. But why don't you give us a few words on, because I know you're a petrol head, Ian. If if Salesforce.com was a car, what car would it be, and how would Elements.Cloud fit into that?
Okay, so a couple of things. One, I think Salesforce licenses are expensive if you've bought 1,000 licenses and only 10 are being used.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is all an adoption issue. If you've got 1,000 licenses and you've now used the platform to build out compliance and a bunch of other functionality, and therefore it's not just Sales Cloud, but they're using it for lots of other features and functions, then it becomes a really valuable license. I think if it's sitting there with only 10 licenses of the 1,000 used and people don't really like using it, then that's a problem. And I think the cost issue is the first thing is it's an adoption issue, which backs back to build the right things. But you asked a question about cars. I think genuine Salesforce is the market leader. It's the Ferrari. It's the top end car. And the challenge I see is that many people are brought into the Salesforce ecosystem and they're like, okay, Salesforce has given us this Ferrari, but they don't give us the maintenance plan, and they haven't given us access to the right fuel, and I don't understand how to buy proper Ferrari parts. And also, my senior management aren't giving me the budget to do things properly. So what happens is you've got the Ferrari, and they're going, okay, I'll go online somewhere and I'll find the best way of maintaining it, but I won't use Ferrari parts, and I won't put proper fuel in it because I haven't got the budget to do that. And over time, that actually causes a whole bunch of problems in terms of the maintenance, the technical debt. And again, I'm not just talking about spending money on Elements.Cloud. I'm talking about the suite of things that you need to maintain your Ferrari, your Salesforce. Backup and restore, data quality, DevOps, change intelligence where we live. The tooling that you need. So it's back to my Ferrari car, your Ferrari, you need to put the best fuel in it, you need the best mechanics, that's training, but then you need the best tools to make sure that you can plug it into its analyzer. You need the right tooling, so you're not using the wrong sort of wrench, you're using the right one. And I think that gets lost in we spent this money on Salesforce. Yeah, okay, but you've also got to allocate money for implementation partners and for the tooling they need to use to make sure so that Salesforce works well.
Yeah.
And that's on senior management. We got admins going, developers going, oh, if only I had the right tools, I can't ask for budget. I think if you went and made the case to the platform owner, the person who writes the check for Salesforce, but if we put proper backup in place, decent DevOps, we did change intelligence, we will all be this much more effective, and therefore Salesforce will become less expensive because we won't have technical debt, we will be actually maintain it, we will get better adoption. All the things that platform owner, the person who writes the check for Salesforce, they signed off on spending money on Salesforce because that's what they were looking for. And it requires a level of tooling on top of Salesforce and a level of training and the right people in place to make that work.
Just to conclude, my final question to you, Ian, is there's going to be a lot of people that are watching this from the Salesforce.com ecosystem, from the ISV network. And you, I'm very privileged to have you here, with the sheer amount of experience that you have in this space. What is the one piece of advice that you would offer to other founders thinking of embarking on the ISV journey?
That's a great question. I think you need to, before you start building something, you've got to be very clear about what that market looks like and the ability for people to spend money on it. And I think back to the earlier problem I talked about, which is there isn't a lot of budget associated with Salesforce support. So find that white space, but make sure that the business case or the justification for it is big enough that you can actually build a market for it. And you could look, there are a couple of places, you can look for horizontal type things like you and I have got. We've got products which are an add-on, it supports it, and it works across multiple industries. Or the other angle you can go is you can look for an industry white space. So you can pick an industry that Salesforce hasn't really tackled and then get really, really good at that add-on for that particular industry. Again, you need to make sure the industry market is big enough and they're prepared to spend money and they're prepared to swap from what they've currently got. But again, you need, picking that space and working out, is there a market and is there budget that you can genuinely unlock before you start building? And that's easy enough to do some of that research before you start jumping in and building things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the bits of advice that I got in my earlier years of, before I fully got into sort of like the commercial sales and that kind of thing was, somebody with many, many more years experience than I sat me down and said, look, Muj, if you want to be successful at selling, you haven't got a clue how to do it right now. The place to start is to take out the yellow pages, right? Find 10 companies at random, get their phone numbers, call them, and sell them something. And if you think you can do that day in, day out, then you'll succeed at it. And it's a similar sort of thing. It's what you're saying is find your white space, qualify it, and just call them, right? Just call people, speak to them, and ask them, if I build it, will you buy it? I guess.
Yeah. For those people who are listening and don't understand what the yellow pages are, it used to be
sorry.
It was a directory of all the phone numbers of companies organised by company type.
Yeah. Well, Americans have this, right? When I was in California, there was a phone book that got delivered to your front door once a year.
Yeah.
So it's whatever that book is called in North America.
It was called the Yellow Pages, and I think there was something called the Silver Pages, which was products for
older people.
Old. Yes. Yeah. There it is.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's about qualify with prejudice. I mean, sometimes you've got to build an MVP or a prototype for people to understand what you have in mind.
Yeah.
And you need to get people to go, okay, will I spend money on that? But before you've got to do some build. But before you start raising money, building a team, you've got to be very clear about whether you genuinely have product market fit. And I think people have product marketing fit. They can tell a story, the website looks right, the product kind of works. Product market fit is when a customer's starting using it going, all the things which they expected to work are there. Product marketing fit is often, customers bought it, they're spending money on it, and they're going, yeah, I know, but your integration to Jira is not quite good enough, and that report, I need 4 more reports. And so that's product marketing fit. Product market fit is when you've finished all those things off. That's when you hit the button and go, right, now let's put some investment behind this. Let's now start really building the team. And I think people start too early, and they start investing before they've really got product market fit.
I think product marketing fit is when it runs really well inside PowerPoint.
Well, but also it could be a product. I mean, genuinely, the product works.
Right. Yeah.
And someone bought it, an evangelist bought it, because they saw the power of it and they saw the potential, and they realised that these extra features will be there in time. So it's not like the wish list of where you're going to go in the roadmap, but it's the like what does it take to get a sort of a reasonable sized company to go and buy this thing? Because actually selling a product to a corporate is really hard. Because the person buying it's taking a huge personal risk.
Yes.
Because the company's quite small. That product's going to be hanging around. When it doesn't work, everyone's going to go, yeah, you're the guy who you made us use this thing. It doesn't kind of work, does it?
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of personal capital that gets put on the line when someone chooses to go with your product when it's in its early stages. So you've got to make sure you're really supporting those users in terms of building out what they really, really need to get the job done. There's a term called jobs to be done, making sure you've got all those covered off.
Absolutely right. I totally agree with you. So just to finish off, how can people get hold of you, Ian?
Easy. Ian Gotts on LinkedIn or Ian at Elements.Cloud. And obviously you can go to the Elements.Cloud website, go and have a look at the GPT product we've launched, and I think you'll be blown away by what we can do with AI. And bear in mind, this is just the beginning. There's so much more that we've got in the roadmap that we can do.
Perfect. Ian, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I'm really grateful. It's been a pleasure. It's been really interesting speaking to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.